Hello and welcome to the Ellen Made Book Club. Today we have another book club discussion and we're talking about the Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I think I've decided to do separate videos for each book club book. Sometimes there might be more of a theme and then it makes sense to have them all in one video, but they tend to get really long and I just think that, someone might want to watch a discussion about one particular book and not the other, so for that reason it makes sense to have them in separate videos. I might try that and then maybe I'll change back and we'll see. I also want to say that this video may contain spoilers. I'm kind of assuming that you have already read the books that we're discussing, so I can be a little bit vague and you will still understand what I'm talking about. So if you haven't read the book, the spoilers might not be so specific. But yeah, just something to be aware of. I talked a little bit about this in my wrap-up video, so you can watch that if you want. For this video, I'm mostly going to focus on the questions that you guys submitted. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, let's just get started. Emily at the Linguist's Library said that she always likes to hear what made a person gravitate toward a specific book, and so I figured I would start with that. So what made me want to read this book was partly the hype around it. I've heard it's really good and everyone seems to have read it and enjoyed it, and so I wanted to have that experience myself as well. And the other reason is that it's a mythological retelling and I love those. I think they're so intriguing, like there's usually a good story in there, and they also feel safe and comforting and magical to read. There's a certain predictability because the stories themselves aren't new, but then there's like a modern take on it and a new way of telling the story that makes it new and exciting, and that's a delicious little ball to me, and so that's why I wanted to read this one. I have also read Circe and Galatea by Madeline Miller before, and I loved both of those, so I had to read the Song of Achilles as well and see what I thought of that, and I'm very happy I did. And then I had two questions that were kind of similar, so I'm just going to group those together, and that is from Nana, who asks, how much knowledge do you have on Greek myths, and did this influence your reading experience or enjoyment? And then RD asked, do you think the reader gets more out of the story knowing something of the Iliad or other Greek myths beforehand? So I took Latin in high school, and as a part of that we studied Roman mythology, and that's very similar to Greek mythology, but just like different names for the gods and the goddesses. So I was familiar with the format of myths, and I think that's beneficial when you're reading mythological retellings. It's a different kind of storytelling. I feel like they are usually a lot of different characters and each character has their own story, and then they kind of blend together and they're all interlinked, and so when you're telling the story of one character you're going to have to incorporate some stories about other characters, and I love that aspect of mythology. It's just like a whole world of characters and stories and they all blend together, and yeah, I just really enjoy that. And some people might not, or it might feel a bit foreign. And it's also the same with Nordic myths, which is my cultural history, with all the different gods for like different values or emotions or forces of nature. Like there's a god of the sea and then god of love and all of that. So I think it's good to have some understanding of what the gods are like and how sort of impulsive they are and selfish, and how they all have their different motives and yeah, things like that. That being said, I have never read the Iliad. I've never read the Odyssey. I know of the Trojan War and the Trojan horse and Achilles' heel and, things like that. But I don't know the particulars, and I'm just familiar with the names and things like that. Being familiar with the names also means that you kind of know what characters are going to be important or what characters are like the big guys, the big gods. When Apollo makes an appearance, for example, you know that he's a significant character. He's not just a random god. He's, someone to be reckoned with. And so I think that's an advantage to have. If I were to read a retelling from an Indian myth, for example, I have no idea who the gods are and which ones are the most powerful or anything like that. So yeah, I definitely think that it helps. But at the same time, I don't think it's necessary to be able to enjoy a story like this, because you get so much information from the novel itself. So I think it's still enjoyable. It just gives you a little bit more of a familiar base to stand on if you know a little bit beforehand. The next few questions are from RD as well. And the first one is, was the story what you were expecting, or did anything surprise you? For the most part, it was pretty much what I expected. I knew of Achilles beforehand, and so I knew that they were going to be like a war hero kind of person. I also knew that it was going to be about the relationship between two men, so Achilles and another man, but I didn't know about Patroclus beforehand. But like I knew that that was the basic premise of the book. I was surprised that it was told from Patroclus' perspective, and I think that was a really good choice because we got to see Achilles up close and hear his thoughts and all of that, but we still got to see him from someone else's perspective, and so we get to see that he is popular and social and kind, but also arrogant and selfish, and I think that was a really good choice to have that particular perspective. I was surprised that there was nothing about Achilles' heel, as far as I can remember. Like, if there was, I missed it. Achilles and Achilles' heel kind of go hand in hand. You can't think of Achilles without thinking about Achilles' heel. I figured that was why he was training alone, so that no one would know about that and like know about his weak spot. Or maybe that was general knowledge. I'm not really sure, but I was surprised that that was never talked about. What made the biggest impact on you? I would say the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus made the biggest impact on me. I think that that was beautifully portrayed. They seem to have a genuine respect and ease between them, which I really appreciated. I liked sort of how they discussed things, even if they weren't in agreement, and how they sort of treated each other and how they made choices for each other's sake. I also found it interesting how Patroclus was sort of aware that he was not the main character. Like, Achilles is the star and I'm just here for the relationship and being supportive and all of that, but like I'm not the main character here. I also liked the start of their relationship and how they were sort of glancing at each other in the cafeteria, and I think that that part of the story was very relatable for anyone who's ever had a crush at school. You kind of like always keeping an eye on where they are and what they're doing, and yeah, it was a really cute part of the story. Would you have changed anything about how the story was told? No, I don't think so. Like I said, I think that the choice to tell it from Patroclus' perspective was a good choice. And the only thing that I wish had been added was the heel. Like, just add the heel. How does it compare with other myth retellings you've read? I think this is pretty good in comparison to other retellings. I haven't read a lot of them yet, but I will. So the ones that I've read are Circe and Galatea by Madeline Miller as well, and then Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. And I think that the Song of Achilles is sort of on par with them. I think I enjoyed Circe and Galatea more than the Song of Achilles, just because I could relate more to the female characters. And I really liked Stone Blind because of the different perspectives in that, and it's a more like, I wouldn't say joyful, but it's a funnier story, and so I think I enjoyed that more for that reason. And yeah, it was just very entertaining. This one was more beautiful, but also sort of more low-key. I think this was a really solid 4-star read, and it's good, but it's not my favorite book of all time. How did you feel about the bits the author added, like the Thetis interactions and the ending? As I said, I haven't read the Iliad, so I wasn't sure about what parts were from the actual myth and what parts were added, so it was all just like a story to me. And I didn't really think about that too much. I didn't even know that Patroclus was an actual character. Like, I had kind of thought that this was Miller's take on Achilles' story, and that she added in this lover character. I didn't know that that was part of the original myth, but it is. I didn't really think about things in terms of like what was additions or not. As for Thetis, I think that was a really good addition. I think that anybody who is in a serious relationship with someone has to deal with their in-laws, And especially with like a younger couple, the parents are going to be involved in, your significant other's life. I liked the dynamic between Achilles and Thetis, and how Achilles was sort of annoyed by her and like knew that she was kind of intense, but he still went to talk to her regularly. And even though he was a bit rebellious, he also knew that he couldn't cross her too much. And I think that was very like accurate to how an older teenager would behave in relation to their parents. And also the fact that Thetis maybe wasn't too happy about his relationship with Patroclus, but also like she can't really do anything about it because they're going to want to be together, and so that's not really something that she can change. Yeah, I think that added a lot of humanity and relatability to the story, so I think that was a really good choice. As for the ending, I'm not sure how much of it was added, but I thought that the ending was good. It seemed fitting, and yeah, I liked all of it. Next question is another one from Nana, and she says, how do you feel about reading war/fight/battle scenes? I usually lose interest or am disgusted by battles. I'm just reluctant to read violent scenes, not because it's triggering, but because I don't want to spend my time with violence. If there is war, I really prefer to read what it's doing with the character internally and leave out the rest. But others love the action in fight scenes. How about you? I don't want to spend too long on battle scenes either, mostly because I think that they are difficult to convey in an interesting way. Like there's so much happening, and so I feel like you can just write out a flurry of hitting people and hurting and pain and gore and movement and the chaos, and then sort of add the fear and the adrenaline and what that's doing to the character. But I don't think that it's like relevant or important to write more specific things about like who's where and who's hit where and all of that. That doesn't really interest me unless it's like something very specific that has a lot of importance for the story. But I do think that it's good to have some of it just to make it clear what the stakes are. Like it's a life or death situation, or like a world of pain for the people who are actually on the battlefield. And so like as opposed to the people who are waging the war and aren't really there on the ground risking their lives. And so I think that that's a function that it has, and it can also be exciting and thrilling and like action packed. And so as long as there is a good balance, I don't mind it, but I don't want to spend too much time on like the strategic movements of everything and things like that. And also not like the gory parts, like mention them and I get that they're there, and then I don't want to read too much more about it. In this case, I think that there was a good balance. There was a little bit of battle scenes, but that was mostly when Patroclus was in the battle, and like we all care about him and his well-being and what he's going through, so that felt relevant to me. Other than that, I felt like most of the time during the battle was spent in the camp or like in the tents and all of that, and so yeah, I think there was a good balance for me in this book. And then I have 2 questions from Helen. The first one is, I love a book that makes me feel something. What was your main emotion on finishing the book? Also, was that key emotion surprising? Honestly, there's been so much hype around this book, and I've been saving it for so long. And so now that I finally got to read it, by the time I was finished, I was kind of like, was that it? Not that I didn't enjoy it, because I really did. I just feel like this was a solid book. The writing was good, the story was good, the relationship and like the emotional depth was good. I liked everything about it, but that's kind of like the standard that I hold a book to. Like if it's not that, then it's below standard. Like this is the level that I want all of my books to be at, and then the exceptional ones get a 5-star. So that was my feeling after reading the book, and I guess I'm not very surprised about that because of the hype, and so I was kind of expecting that, but also there was such a hype, so I guess I was also expecting to have been more emotionally involved in the story. Apart from that feeling, I felt the love from the relationship and also the sadness from the ending. I don't think I cried reading this, and like it didn't destroy me in any way. I've heard people say that this is like so sad, and I didn't read it that way, or I didn't feel that way. You are having a nature ramble with a character from the book, spending several hours with them. Who would you choose to join you, and what questions would you want to ask them? And any theme from the book you would wish to discuss with the author. I would want to spend those hours with Chiron. He seems like a very kind and straightforward character, and I think he could teach me a lot. So I would ask him questions like, why are there stars? What does the river feel? Or what's your favorite flower and why? I would just like to have an ethereal kind of discussion about the nature that we're walking through and just hear his take on those kinds of questions. And yeah, I think that would be really nice. And then I would ask the author why she chose to not include the heel. My thinking was like, is Patroclus his heel? Like, because I didn't know Patroclus was a part of the original myth. So in my mind, I was like, maybe Achilles' heel is in this story Patroclus, because that was his weak spot and that was his person that he wanted to protect and save and make decisions based on. And so was he the embodiment of Achilles' heel in this story? Like, was that the intention, or is that in my head? Or I don't know. That's a theme that I would want to discuss with her, I think. Okay, so those were all of the questions about the Song of Achilles. Thank you to everyone who participated in the book club in any way. If you read the book, or if you voted on what books to read, or if you left a comment or a question. If you have any other questions, please let me know in the comments and I will try to answer them there. And I would also love to hear what your answers to these questions would be in the comments or in a video, however you choose to answer them. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this discussion. And if you want to see the discussion about Pachinko, you can just click on this video right here and that will take you straight there. And yeah, I hope you're having a fantastic day and I will see you in the next one.